Everybody, hope you're having a fantastic time wherever you are in the world. I've got Doc Brown with us, who's come on the channel. He's got a lovely accent out of Tennessee. And we're going to be discussing the history of elite and royal bloodlines, because Doc has explored the Serpent Seed Theory from multiple perspectives, including biblical parables where Jesus may be referencing an ancient seed war, which also touches on the dragon legacy, which presents the serpent seed concept through a secular lens, connecting it to elite and royal bloodlines. We're going to be delving into the topic of elongated skulls, of which Doc has a prop. But huge thank you for joining us. And what got you into all this in the first place, my friend?
First off, Sean, thank you for having me, man. But yeah, I guess it was an accident. I stumbled into it. I was joking around with some friends one day. We were talking about Bigfoot, and Genesis 25:25 just kind of popped into my head there. And for those that's unfamiliar, that's the birth of Esau. And it says the first one came out red, covered in hair from head to toe, like a hairy cloak. And I was like, man, that sounds pretty squatchy to me, fellas. What do you think? And so it was just kind of like a little inside joke. But then I started stumbling across other things. Like I was going through the book of Jasher, and you find more of these hairy wild men in there. And Esau supposedly battles King Nimrod. They fight to the death for the supernatural garments from the Garden of God. And then the Epic of Gilgamesh, I thought that looked like just a mirrored parallel of Esau and Nimrod. And so I just started researching this guy. And I started going through all the extra biblical books and texts, and all of them point to Esau being a serpent seed. So then I started going down the trail of the serpent seed, going back to Genesis and Cain, and it just kind of branched off from there, honestly. And I got introduced to Nicholas DeVere, the Dragon Legacy, and that honestly just runs parallel with the Genesis narrative, and even the elites. They claim to be stemmed from this dragon court going back to Cain and claiming they have the divine right to rule.
Yeah, and we had David Icke on, and he was talking about the history of the elite and royal bloodlines. So, if you're getting started then with the history of this, how far back does it go? What's the earliest we can talk about?
Yeah, for me, I think it goes back to the very beginning. If you go to the biblical narrative in Genesis, you have this Garden of Eden scene. And growing up, I was always just taught that Adam and Eve bit into this apple, and it was that tree of forbidden fruit of good knowledge, good and evil knowledge, and that they were kicked out of the garden for it. And that was the first sin that kicked off the world, basically. And like I said, when I had read that about this serpent seed with Esau, I went back to Genesis and got to reading it. And I actually had an interview with this woman named Dr. Joy Pugh, and she honestly, she's the one that red pilled me in this because I'd heard about the serpent seed theory before, but I never looked into it. Uh, I had some highly respectable guys that I really enjoyed their work would scoff at it and say there's no water to be held in that cup. So I just kind of took their word for it, never looked into it. And when I had her on the show, she brought it up. And I'm not going to lie, when she brought it up, in my head, I was like, oh no, here we go. This is going to be some crazy serpent seed stuff. I didn't want to go here. But I listened with an open mind. And I'm not going to lie, she totally changed my paradigm. And I've been reading this Bible totally different ever since. But she was a Southern woman. She was from Georgia. So she might have, got to me a little better. She had that Southern, accent, reminded me of my grandma, But she was talking. She said, I was always talking about this apple. She said, I went back and read. She said, there is no apple. And I was like, what? And sure enough, yeah, I went back. Yeah, there's no apple there. And she said, if we look, it just says they partake. Eve partakes of this tree. And that after she partakes of this tree, what happens? She said, they immediately cover their reproductive organs. And then she said, then look at the cursings. She said, every single one of the cursings has something to do with sexual reproduction. She said, if you look at the Bible, all of God's curses correlate to the crime. She said, so the curses were that he would put enmity between her seed and thy seed, talking to the serpent. So it says plainly right there that she's going to have a seed, humanity, and the serpent is going to have a seed, and they're going to be at enmity, at war with one another, and that he would increase her menstruation, and he would increase her pain in childbearing and labor. And so, yeah, every single one of these curses is correlated to sexual reproduction. And then she said, and then if you go into the etymology of the names, she said, the names are important. Words mean things. She said, Cain, his name means acquired. She said, what loving mother would name their child acquired? She said, this is something that, parents think about for months in advance and debate and have a whole list of names. She said, why would any loving mother name their child acquired? She said, because he was acquired by Adam. And she said, if you look at Abel, his name, when you go into the etymology of that name, that means breath. She said, why did they name him breath? She said, because Adam was a lifeless being until the breath of God was given to him. So he was named after his father because he was of his similitude. And then she said, as soon as you get out of the garden, what happens? Cain kills Abel. There's war, there's enmity between the two seeds and the two lines. And I was like, oh man, and she said, she pulled out all these other verses too, where afterwards Seth was born. And it says that Seth was in the similitude of Adam because the other wasn't. He was, and his name actually means replacement. He was the replacement seed. And as you go through the book, I think that I found just all of these micro and macro and micro narratives telling the same story.
I found that I kind of just went down the trail, and I had a bunch of people when I started talking to my friends about this. They were like, Satan's not a tree. How are you getting that? And when you go through the scripture, there's several verses that compares Satan to a tree allegorically. When he's talking to the Pharaoh of Egypt, he's talking to the Pharaoh, condemning him and all this stuff, but then the language changes. He's no longer talking to the king. He's talking to the spiritual entity behind the king. And he's saying that, you were in the Garden of Eden. You're the most beautiful tree. And all the other trees of Eden, looked at you with jealousy for your beauty. Uh, and it says that, you'll be cast down. You get to the Isaiah 14 passage. It talks about, this is the famous verse where, how art thou fallen from heaven, O day star? It says that you will be cut down. And it talks about the branches. It says that the Satan, the Hasatan, is the abominable branch. And you get this same genealogical language with the righteous branch also, because it talks about the coming of the Messiah, and it says that he would be of the root of the seed of Jesse, and he would be the righteous branch. So when you get the lingo of trees, it's always talking about genealogies and family trees. And you have all these examples of Satan being compared to this tree, the most beautiful tree in the Garden of Eden. So when I show people that, they're like, "Oh, well, he's talking to that king. That's not Satan." Well, this king was not in the Garden of Eden. The angels and the angelic host didn't look at this guy and glory and envy of all his beauty. And then when you go to Ezekiel 28, that is the same exact same thing there. This is a condemnation to the king of Tyre. And yeah, he's clearly talking to this king. But partway through, once again, the language changes. He's no longer talking to this king. He's talking to the spiritual entity, the Hasatan behind the king and the ruler. And he says, you were in the Garden of Eden, once again, perfect in all your ways, until iniquity was found in you, and you were cast from the mountain of God as a profane thing. And it says, every precious stone was your covering. It says beryl, onyx, topaz, jasper. It names all these stones. And this is a Polaroid picture of the priestly ephod. So it's painting Satan in a priestly role. And then not only is it painting him in a priestly role, just to remove any doubt whatsoever, when you go on down just a couple verses, it says that you profaned your sanctuaries and that you walked amongst the stones of fire. So they're painting him as like the high priest over all creation. And when I started digging into the story of Genesis a little deeper, and once I talked to my friend, Dr. Joy Pugh, she was talking about some of the Hebrew language and how these words are just like any other language. You have one word that can have multiple meanings. So it's important to go back and insert those different meanings and see which one fits better in the context. And so the nakash is the Hebrew word that we get in the garden for this serpent. Well, nakash can mean serpent, but at the same time, it can also mean the shining one, or the one who practices divination. So if you ask yourself, what makes more sense? A talking snake deceived Adam and Eve on the holy mountain of God, or a divine being, a shining one, deceived Adam and Eve? Because number one, snakes don't talk. And if a snake talked, we would see the context that Eve and Adam would have been taken back by it, but they weren't. And not only were they not taken back, they were very receptive to what this entity said to them. It didn't even second guessing. They believed him and they trusted him. I think because they were familiar with him. They seen him in the garden of God because he was the high priest. And if you look at it, like I said, with the original languages too, everybody wants to argue with me and say, well, it says that they ate. That's not a sexual act. I was like, well, yeah, once again, if you go into the Hebrew, that same word multiple times throughout the text is translated to enjoys. So Eve partook of the tree and she enjoyed. And then she goes to her husband and he too enjoyed. And I started looking at this and formulating this idea and opinion. And then once I went through the extra biblical books, this was the belief of the ancients. So it was kind of like a confirming thing for me. But I was like, okay, if we look at this as a family, we have the angelic host, and they are the elder brothers. They're the elder race, like Timothy Alberino likes to say. And the book of Job tells us, when he finally condemns Job, he says, where were you when I hung the stars? Where were you when I laid the foundations? Answer me these things if you know. He said, and where were you when the morning stars, the sons of God, the B'nai Ha Elohim, shouted for joy at the sight of creation? So that shows you that they were there first. They are our elder brothers. So we are the younger brother. So imagine the elder brother who helped run the family business was the high priest. All of a sudden, he's run the company, and then dad shows up with the little brother, says, okay, hey, I know you've done a real good job thus far, but here, your younger brother's going to take over the company and have dominion over the company now. Of course, he was like, hell no. I'm not bound down to this little twerp. I'm greater than him. I've been here since the beginning. I helped build all this. No. So that's the reason for the rebellion, I believe. And it says in there that after this happens, that God provides for them a covering. And I was always taught that, once again, something that's not in the text. I mean, it's a beautiful picture, but it's just not in the text. But I was always taught that this was like a foreshadowing of Christ, that when they sinned, something had to die. And once it died, the blood that was shed, they took the skins of this animal, and that was to cover their nakedness. And like I said, I mean, that's a beautiful thought, But the text doesn't say that. It just says that when you go into the Hebrew, that he provided them a canonet. And many times that this word is translated to tunic. And so I was like, well, the extra biblical books say that Adam and Eve's coverings were the skins of the nakash. And you remember Ezekiel 28, every precious stone was your covering, beryl, onyx, topaz, jasper. He would definitely be a shining one with this breastplate on. I mean, it kind of fits the description of his name, but it says that was his covering. So if his covering was taken from him and given to Adam, this is the priestly ephod. And so this is like the crown or the scepter. It shows authority of the king and priest of creation. And there is where dominion was given to Adam. So this seed war, you have younger brother, elder brother, and they're fighting and battling over the birthright. Who's going to have dominion over the earth? And the serpent seed, where they are the quote unquote elder brothers, they feel like they were screwed out of their birthright and their inheritance. So they rebelled and they're fighting the younger brother, which is humanity, for the dominion of earth. And I think we see it, like I said, like micro and macrocosms all through the text. And you had mentioned it in pre-roll. The parables of Jesus even tells this same story, guys. They're trying to beat it into your head, but it's there for those with eyes to see and ears to hear. When Jesus is talking, he gives a parable about the good tenant. In this story, he says a landowner, God, leases out a piece of land to some farmers, the angelic host, and they had an agreement that he would let them use the land and farm it and work it, but when it come time for harvest, the owner would get the first fruits. Well, harvest time comes, and they don't want to pay up. So he sends his messenger, aka the prophet. And what do? They beat the prophet and send him away. So then he sends another prophet, another messenger. They kill this one. And then he says, well, I'll send my son. They will not harm my son. And when the son shows up, they plot and they say, we'll kill the son. Then there's no one to inherit this land, and it'll be ours. And he'll know that we mean business. So they kill the son. That son was Jesus. And it's the story of the dominion of earth and the birthright, the battle of the birthright and the seed wars. Another one, the parable of the sowing of the seeds. Okay, it's the same context. It's a landowner with land. He sows some seed, and it says that in his absence, the adversary, and when you go into the Hebrew, that is the Hasatan, the Satan, sown his seed. And seeds always talk about genealogies and children. Okay, then it says that the workers come back to the owner and say, sir, did you not plant good seed? But behold, there's tares growing amongst the wheat. Shall we pull them up? And he says, no, lest you harm the wheat in pulling up the tares. He said, no, let them grow together. And come harvest time, we will pull them all up and we'll separate the wheat from the tares and bind up the tares and throw them into the fire. And we will bound up the wheat to store into my barns. I think he's clearly talking about the seed war. The tares were sown amongst the wheat, and we have the serpent seed amongst us today, I do believe.
And who would that be?
That's all your ruling classes. You know, you have the Merovingians, you have the DeVeres, and they've tried their best to obfuscate, their identities and who they are, but that's who they are. They're amongst us. And if you go back through the Bible, it's you have Genesis 6 also. It says the B'nai Ha Elohim, the sons of God, came down and bred with the daughters of men. and made Nephilim giants. They were the mighty men of old, the Gibor. And I think science shows us the theory of entropy very well. Nothing gets better over time. Everything gets worse. And I think that's what we see with these bloodlines. It's like over time, that DNA strand got weaker and weaker. And through interbreeding, they really diluted down the bloodline. And that's why you have so many royals that resulted into incest, breed with each other, trying to keep that bloodline pure because it was starting to fade away and dilute away. So they're trying everything they can to try and preserve this bloodline. And it's not working out too well for them. You know, they're having reproductive issues. And we also know after incest so many years, you have birth defects and brain abnormalities and things like that. So it's not really working out in their favor, but they're trying everything that they can. And when I got into Nicholas DeVere, his book, that gave me the whole secular side of it. And these DeVeres, that they claim to be from this dragon court. And I thought it was really fascinating how they come at you with a non-biblical perspective, but every single bit of it references back and points to it. It's like that's the starting point, because they even point back to Cain, and that's where they draw their beginnings from. But in the beginning of the book, DeVere was talking about how you have all these Wiccans and witches and sorcerers and stuff practicing all this kind of magic. He says that these Merovingians and these ancient bloodlines that are the real deal sit back and laugh at these people. He said because they could have the perfect spell books. They could have the ancient grimoires with all the spells and stuff that worked, you know, back in the day. He said they could follow it to a T, but they're not going to get the same results because the power is in the blood. And the Bible even tells you that. You know, it says how many times? It says, do not drink the blood. The life force, the power is in the blood. And so he talks about how all this stuff through culture just kind of really aggravates this dragon court, how these people are trying to imitate them and do the things that they could do, but they're just not bred for it. They don't have the power. And he even talked about their struggle in breeding and reproducing also. And he said that what they had resulted in doing was to interbreeding with the mudbloods, so to speak, as Harry Potter likes to put it, and to bring in people into their family like as an adoption. They would do bloodletting, and they would drink and consume the blood of the royale, and that way they had their blood in them. So whether it's true or not, we can debate, but we cannot debate that this is what they believe. And if they believe it, I think we owe it to ourselves, in the very least, to study out what they believe and why they do what they do, because these are the people in control. These are the people with the money and with the power and the status. So I think it's so very important that we know what they think they know or believe.
So how does all this tie in then with other ancient civilizations such as the Egyptians, Babylonians, Assyrians?
Yeah. See, I think it's the same story, but just told through different lenses and different perspectives. Because there's a reason why all these stories rhyme. I think because they all stem from the same ancient source. You know, when you get to the Anunnaki and their stories, what happens there? They're these gods that came down and tried to domesticate the earth, and they make this garden, and they get tired of doing the work, so they create this human class as like worker bees. And then Enki, who's basically a mirrored image of the Hasatan, what does he do? He goes in and genetically modifies a new race, and this race has intelligence and can rebel against the creators. I I mean, this is the same story I've been talking about to you tonight, folks. It's just told from a different lens, a different perspective. And for those that, want to try to poo-poo on the Bible and say, these texts outdate the Bible, so therefore I did it again. But they copy from the Bible. So if we follow the biblical story, it says in there that Genesis 6, when the angels came down and bred with the daughters of men, they were kicked out for it. So, of course, you're going to get their story first because they were here first. So even the timeline makes sense to me. And when we go to all these other texts and these other legends and stories, they're all the same. I mean, the caveats are a little different. The names change a little bit, but overall, I mean, it's the same story. There we
All
go.
right.
I worked it.
Yeah, you're back. All right, so viewers, your audio is fine. We're here with Doc Brown. I just want to let the viewers know, if you want to support Doc's work, we've got all of his links in the description box on YouTube, and I'm going to put them all in the live chat now. YouTube, Twitter, podcast. If you've got any questions for Doc while we are live, put them in the chat right now. I see that a few questions have already come in, but please, by all means, keep them coming. And we will keep going with this. So my question is, if these bloodlines, like you said, they create these the defects, the incest, etc. As we saw with the royal family bringing in Princess Diana, that's what David Icke said. That was a genetic thing. Why do they try to keep these bloodlines going then? If they've got all of, if they can create defects, birth defects.
Yeah, because which I'm no geneticist, but I mean I've listened to some people talk on these things, and I've heard them talk about how any mutation in your DNA is random. It's all random mutation, so it's kind of like Russian roulette. So it's like they know they run the chance of these defects and it not working, but they're so desperate to try to hold on to the power, and I think even the magic, if you want to call it that, of their blood. So they're like, yeah, we know it runs risks, but the risk is worth the reward, I believe, is their mindset. And like we talked about just throughout the years, these what's the word, mutations, they manifest in different ways, I believe. I think that's why we have, not only in the Bible but throughout the world, these legends about these giants. I think it manifested in giganticism sometimes. I think the elongated skulls that we see is another one of those random mutations from the fallen angel DNA, the serpent seed. We get to looking at hairy men like Esau, how I talked about. Even science recognizes this. They call it hypertrichosis. And they even admit that it's a malfunction in the DNA. And I did not know this till I got to looking into the research for my book, was we are all covered in hair in the womb. And they call it Lugano hair, I believe is how it's pronounced. But at a certain point in the third trimester, your DNA tells your body to shed this hair. And then you come out, looking normal. But in these cases where you hear about the wolf man, or even the Sasquatch, or the wild men, the woodwose, in your neck of the woods, is these people that had a genetic malfunction and was born covered in hair from head to toe like Esau was. And it's just, it's wild to look at because, once again, all those things that I mentioned are worldwide. It doesn't matter what culture you go to, what continent, language, people group, they all have similar stories. The names may be a little different, but it's just wild to see. And when I got to looking through Esau, that was honestly so mind-blowing for me because I grew up in church my whole life and never heard of this stuff. And So when I got to looking through him, he come out, covered in hair. It's a Polaroid picture of Genesis 3:15 in the seed war. Then when I got to looking through the extra biblical books, it just says flat out that Michael was the guardian angel of Jacob, but Esau had a guardian angel, and his guardian angel was Samael. And according to the Jewish legends and texts, this is the name of Satan before the fall, and he was known as the angel of death, the viper of God. And it says that he even came out with a serpent's branding, and that while his mother was pregnant, that when she would walk by a house that was devoted to Yahweh, the worship of Yahweh, that Jacob would stir with excitement. But when she would walk by a house in service to a pagan deity, that Esau would stir with excitement. And that she was in such travail that she asked around to the other women, is this normal? Did you guys have this same kind of pain and complications during your pregnancy? And they all told her no. But there was one that they had heard of that had similar pregnancies, and it was Nimrod's mother. And once I got into the book of Jasher, it says that, and of course, let me back up, the trading of the birthright, that is like the most famous thing that Esau's known for. And that's why I have it depicted on the front of my book, too. I have this hairy looking wild man walking away with a bow on his back, and then the bowl of red stew underneath him, and he's walking away from it. But as a kid, that never made sense to me. I was like, modern context, your father's Donald Trump. You're the eldest son. You're about to inherit billions of dollars, the company business, the real estate. I mean, the keys to the kingdom are yours. And you come in from trading stocks all day, and your younger brother's sitting on the couch eating a bag of Doritos, and you're like, oh man, I'm hungry. Could I get some of those Doritos? And he's like, yeah, sure. Just sign over the company and everything you're going to inherit, and they're yours. Oh, yeah, sure. And even Esau says, what use is a birthright to me when I am dead? Take it. I was like, that makes absolutely no sense to me. There's something that we're missing here. And even his name, he was known as the mighty hunter, Esau. If this man was hungry, he could have went and got a lion and had lion steak for supper. This mighty hunter wasn't starving, I don't think. But the text just says that he comes in from the field exhausted. But when you go into the book of Jasher, it says that Nimrod, his name was also the mighty hunter, the Gibborim. It says that he built up hatred and envy and jealousy against Esau all of his days. And so it's kind of like the Highlander. There can only be one, baby. So they was going to show each other who the real mighty man was. And it words it like Nimrod is going out and hunting for this hairy beast of a man named Esau. And he takes a hunting party with him. And so they split off. One party goes one way, and him and two other Gibborim, the same word used time and time again to describe the Nephilim giants in the Bible, and go off looking for Esau. But it says that Esau spots them, and he hides himself. And then at the opportune time, he jumps out, and he cuts off the head of Nimrod, and then fights the other two Gibborim to the death. And it says that once he kills him, the hunting party that broke off heard the commotion and come running, but he takes the time to remove Nimrod's garments. And it says these garments were the reason that Nimrod was a Gibborim, why he was able to prevail over all the nations. And it says that he runs home, hides those garments in his tent, and then he enters the tent of his brother Jacob, where he's preparing red stew. So it dovetails perfectly into the book of Genesis. Yeah, he come in from the field exhausted, all right. He just killed Nimrod, the king, and two other giants. So modern context, you just killed the president, and the feds are after you. You're on the run. He probably sustained some life-threatening injuries during this exchange, and he was desperate, and that's why he traded it. I think the the red stew is allegorical for give me sustenance, sew me up, hide me. And if you take that viewpoint, how Esau responds makes perfect sense now when he says, yeah, sure, I'll help you, but you're going to trade me the birthright. He says, what use is a birthright to me when I am dead? Take it. And I was like, no, that makes a lot more sense. But then my next question was, what are these garments and why are they so special? Why did he take the time to steal them? And then on the run, bleeding out, takes the time to hide them before he goes to get life-saving care. And it ties into what I just spoke about earlier. This was the supernatural garments from the Garden of God, Adam's coverings, which was the symbol of kingship and priesthood. This, I found out through all the extra biblical writings, this is the birthright. This is what the seed war is all over. This is basically the crown. So people that's into Game of Thrones, man, Game of Thrones ain't got nothing on the Bible. That's the story of the Bible. And what I thought was really cool, because like I said, I'm 40-year-old. Thought I knew the Bible really well up until probably around 2012. And just seen a whole new text. And these extra biblical books and legends, Lewis Ginsburg, Legends of the Jews, is a great 6-book series that I highly suggest anybody that's into this stuff check those out. But in there, it traces the passing down of these garments and this birthright. And I'm a Southern man, so the only kind of context I got is like your grandpa's old rifle. It's a family heirloom. It gets passed to the eldest son on down the line. It's an important family heirloom. That's what these garments were. And it traces them. It says that Adam had them, Enoch had them, Methuselah had them, Noah ends up with them and takes them over the flood. And it says that in Ham's going out, Ham steals the garments. And then Ham gives them to Cush. It says Cush in his old age had Nimrod and give it to Nimrod. And when Nimrod turned 20 years old, he put on the garments. And then he became a Gibbelim. And once again, here's another story that made absolutely no sense to me, was the uncovering of Noah's nakedness. The story that I was taught was basically Ham comes in and Noah is pissed drunk and naked, laying in the floor, and that he happens to see him, or maybe even makes a remark about him or something, making fun of him. Then he wakes up and his genealogy is cursed. And I was like, man, that's harsh. If I was at school all day and I get off the bus and my dad's pissed drunk laying in the floor naked, that ain't my fault. That's his fault. And like I mentioned earlier with the garden, the curses always correlate to the crime. And it's usually the opposite of what the person's trying to achieve. So if we look at that story, it says that Ham uncovered his father's nakedness. But when you go to Leviticus 17, if you let Scripture interpret Scripture, it says there, to sleep with thy father's wife is to uncover thy father's nakedness. It is your father's nakedness. And I found out that this is an act of rebellion in the ancient world. We see it time and time again in the Bible. Absalom, David's son, when he runs David out of the kingdom and tries to usurp the throne, the first thing he does is he pitches a tent on top of David's house, and he goes into all of David's concubines in the sight of all of Israel. Reuben does the same thing. When he's trying to usurp his dominance, he sleeps with all his father's concubines as an act of rebellion to take over the household. So this was an act of rebellion. So Ham slept with his mother. And then when he goes outside, I think he tells his brothers, he's like, hey, Dad's a drunk. He's depressed. He's unfit to rule. I just did this deed. You guys go do it too. And he can't take on all three of us. The world is ours. We'll divide it amongst ourselves. It's our time to rule. And it says that they, refuse the rebellion. But in that story, it says they take a garment, place upon their shoulders, and walk backwards and cover their father's nakedness. And I was like, is that the garments from the Garden of God? And then when you get to looking at the original Hebrew, it don't say a garment. It says they took the garment, placed it on their shoulders, walked backwards and covered their father's nakedness. So I was like, okay, even theologically, this makes sense. He was trying to take the crown, so they took the symbol of priesthood and kingship and placed it back upon their father. And it also made a whole lot more sense when the cursing comes, because he curses Canaan, not Ham. And it's like, well, if you're reading this chronologically, Canaan's not even born yet. So why is he cursing Canaan? Because it says that when he recovered from his wine, it doesn't give you a time. We assume it's a day. I think it was probably several months down the road once he drunk all the grapes dry. There was no more to drink, so he come off the wagon, so to speak. And when he did, he noticed a baby bump that his wife was rocking, and it wasn't his, and that they were going to name it Canaan. And he heard about the rebellion. So he said, cursed be Canaan. He said, a servant to thy brother Shem and Japheth he shall be. And I was like, oh man, that's the only way he could be Shem and Japheth's brother is if, yeah, they got the same mother, bro.
Doc, people are really fascinated by this. You got tons of questions coming in. I'll stop hogging you and start to put some of these questions forward to you. Jan wants to know, do blood groups have relevance?
Honestly, I don't know, but I've heard a lot of people talk about like the Rh negatives and things like that. But honestly, I really don't know. But there's two groups with this serpent seed, and I guess I want to tell you where mine is, where my flag is. There's some people that thinks that there's two seed lines, and one is irredeemable, and they're destined and born to go to hell. They're unredeemable. I don't take that stance. I take the stance of we're basically, if you go back far enough, we're all mutts. I mean, we all got some muddy genealogies. We probably got all a little touch of, Nephilim or something in us. But I think at the cross, he shed his blood for all. And Paul tells you, to preach the gospel unto all creatures, all of creation. So I think that yes, the blood can set you up for failure and for damnation, but I think we all have a free will choice. So I just wanted to say that because there are a lot of people that hold to the serpent seed theory that use it for what am I looking for? Ulterior motives, for racist motives, because there's been plenty of people like the Ku Klux Klan. They adopted this. I do not take that standpoint.
All right. So A. Baker, why do you think ESAU as that Esau?
Yeah.
Why did he hate his birthright, please?
Yeah, and that's the thing is, that's what I was always taught. I was always taught that he just hated his birthright and he was just so eager to give it away, and that he was a man of the flesh. He didn't think of the long game. He just thought of the now. So whatever would please his eyes or flesh of the now, that's what he was going to go for. But I think he didn't despise it, because when you look at that story, he was bleeding out, dying, and desperate. So he told his brother whatever he wanted to hear so he could get that life-saving care, I believe. And I think we see that as a matter of fact, because later when Isaac goes to bless them, because this is basically like a verbal agreement. If I tell you, Sean, I'm like, hey, we're good friends. I want you to have my 2010 Dodge Challenger. That's a verbal agreement. When I die, you could go up to my family and be like, hey, Justin told me I could have his car. And they'll be like, well, we just got back from the lawyer's office. Here's the will signed, and it ain't going to you. So I looked at Isaac's deathbed blessing as kind of like the lawger's office, getting that stamp of approval. It's final. And he calls in Esau to give him his blessing and the birthright. And if he intended on honoring his agreement, that would have been the perfect time to say, hey, Father, I appreciate it, but I traded it to my younger brother. You need to bless him. But he doesn't do that. He's like, okay, yep, I'll go out and get you prepare you some food, and I'll come back and you can bless me. So I think that shows that he didn't despise it. He wanted it. And when he comes back and realizes that the fix is in, because if we pay attention, what happens in that story, Rebecca hears the conversation, tells Jacob to go out and kill what? A goat, and bring the meat to her, and she would prepare a delicious meal, and that they would wrap him in this goat's fur, and he would pretend to be Esau and steal the birthright and blessing. So where Esau's talked about being this hairy, that's not poetic language. I mean, he was literally that hairy. But the garments are there too, because it's like the cherry on top. A lot of people miss it. Before she sends Jacob in, it says that she goes to Esau's tent and takes his quote unquote special garments. So I think she took those garments from the Garden of God and placed it on Jacob. And when he walked in, deceived him. After everything was done, Esau comes back. He's mad. He screams out in anger, and he threatens to kill Jacob for stealing his birthright. And Jacob ends up having to leave and hide out in the land of Haran for many years till his brother's wrath subsided. So I don't think he despised it at all. I mean, he was fighting like hell to keep it, and was even willing to kill his brother to try to get it back.
So is this why the royal families are so worshipped and called blue bloods and think they're so special? Does it relate to these bloodlines, the history of these bloodlines?
Yes. I think the whole blue bloods is going back to this dragon court, or in the biblical lens, this serpent seed. And they were the elder brother. Dominion and the right to rule was supposed to have been theirs, but they were quote unquote screwed out of their birthright. And so you see this with Jacob and Esau. You see it with Cain and Abel. You even see it with Abraham. When Abraham, him and Sarah can't have a child, well, Sarah's freaked out thinking that she's going to be replaced by a younger woman. So she takes Hagar and gives Hagar to Abraham and says, sleep with her, have a lineage with her. And he does, and he has Ishmael. Ishmael was the oldest son. He was supposed to get the birthright and the inheritance. But what happens? Rebecca miraculously gets pregnant, and the younger brother gets the birthright. So, I mean, I think that we just see this time and time again. Even the parable of the prodigal son. This is the same story. In that story, what happens? You have an older son that is always there by the father's side, but the younger son wants his birthright and inheritance now. So he gets it, and he goes off and he squanders it away. That's us, folks, the younger brother. And then what happens? The younger brother comes back and begs for forgiveness and to be taken back into the home, into the family. But the father's waiting by the gate with open arms. And it says they put a signet ring of authority and a cloak of authority back on the younger brother and restores him back to his position. Well, what happens? The elder brother's pissed. He pulls his father to the side and he said, basically, I've been here the whole time, Father. I've never left you. I've never soiled our family name. I've not squandered my inheritance. I've been the good child. But you throw this big party for this joke of a son. Where's my party? Where's my celebration and love feast that you've thrown for him? I've been here the whole time. I think that's, once again, another microcosm of the overall story of the Bible and of God's family. The elder brother, the angelic race, and the younger brother, humanity.
So with Bohemian Grove, then, you've got all these world leaders getting together to do this mock blood sacrifice. How does that tie into this?
I think that these type of groups and things like that are kind of like the Freemasons. I tell people, do I think every person that's a part of the Freemasonry is a Luciferian occult member that worships Satan? No. I think that for the most part, they're in it for just a good old boys club to get away from the wife, have some drinks, and have a club and a hobby and camaraderie. But the higher ups you go, those are the ones like Albert Pike talks about in his book, Morals and Dogma, that once they get to the 32nd and 33rd degree, that's when it's revealed to them that the grand architect is Lucifer, the light bearer. So, and I kind of use this analogy, I've used it before, it kind of shows my age, but the original Ninja Turtles, you remember when they're in New York and the Foot Clan starts this little group for all the wild teenagers to come to and play video games, and they have this big warehouse. Well, that warehouse is full of thousands of kids. They go there, smoke and party and play video games. They know nothing about the Foot Clan, even though the Foot Clan runs it. But there's a select few that they see promise in, that they walk up to discreetly and say, hey, come back here at the back room with us. We're going to show you what we really do. I think that's the same thing. And I think it's so muddy. And I'm not going to pretend to say that I know everything, but my opinion is that you have these groups. Some are just kind of like sleight of hand, like look over here at this while we are over here doing this, deception type things. Or there are groups where they pretend to bring in people and make them feel important and use them as like foot soldiers and cronies. But the higher ups that are never seen at these things are the ones behind the scenes pulling the strings, kind of like the Ezekiel 28 king of Tyre and the Pharaoh of Egypt, how there's this entity in the ear of the world leader pulling the strings and nudging them to do their bidding. I think that's the same thing we see today.
All right. So the next question then is from Bonnie. Who do you know and thoughts about Astana, also called the City of the Fallen Angels?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that.
I'm not either. You're also getting asked about Lilith.
Oh, Lilith. See, I think with Lilith is the Jewish legends and ways of basically splitting off of Eve into two personalities, basically. And this dragon court, this dragon lineage, takes a lot of biblical history and a lot of world history and kind of morph them and spin them into each other. And I'm of the opinion that, like the Jewish mysticism, the Kabbalah, they, to like basically preserve the innocence of Eve, like split her into two personalities. And Lilith is the one that gets the blame for being the evil one and for propagating the serpent seed. And so, from people that I've talked to and read, I think that sounds feasible to me because she was one of the original patriarchs. And if this serpent seed thing is true, and I think they believed it, whether it's true or not, they believed it. This was a way of them preserving the innocence of one of the patriarchs.
Gotcha. All right. You've got a question from Agent Orange. Do you have any links that head towards the ancient Americas bloodline?
Well, me, I take the position of L.A. Marzulli, and I try to give credit where credit is due. I've never really had an original idea in my life, but I love to read, and I love to get different perspectives on subjects and kind of compile the pieces together and try to form an overall opinion. But L.A. Marzulli, he's got a pretty good theory that he has worked out with Fritz Zimmerman that I kind of hold to. And they basically say that when you get Joshua and Caleb coming into the Holy Land and cleansing the Holy Land, this is where a lot of people want to say, well, your God's a genocidal God. He called for the devastation of entire people groups, mass genocide. Well, when you read into that, all the clans that he tells them to do that to devout to destruction, were known Nephilim giant clans. He was trying to purge the land of this hybrid race. And he says that he believes that during this conquest, the smart ones anyway, seen how they just rolled through AI like it wasn't nothing. They got to Jericho and then just marched around the city and collapsed the walls without even swinging the first sword. I think the smart ones were like, oh, hell no, we're out of here. We ain't looking to die. So they started migrating north. And then you had this certain group that was later known as the Phoenicians. They were known seafaring people. I think that they loaded up their boats and they sailed to the Americas. And during this time frame, they speculate that the waters, were like 200 foot higher. And there was a direct path, like from around New England, straight into the Great Lakes area. And here at this Great Lakes area, around the Island Royale, is the one of the largest and most purest copper mines in the world. And this copper mine, scientists have, guesstimated of the removal of the copper to be like hundreds of thousands of tons of copper missing from this place. And that copper tests at 98.8% purity. It's the purest copper in the world, so they can pinpoint it. And they find that copper all over the world. So I think these giants come to North America, went into the Great Lakes, mined all this copper, and they were seafaring people going back and forth, fueling the Bronze Age, I believe. And that's why we find this 98.8% pure copper in China, Europe, South America, Africa, everywhere. It's everywhere because it was from these Nephilim giant tribes that escaped during the Great Diaspora. And then from there, they took the Ohio River Valley straight down and got deeper into North America. And I think that's why we see all these mounds in North America. You have Serpent Mound, you have Cahokia, Enon, Miamisburg, just all these huge, Newark, these huge megalithic earthworks. And it's all concentrated in this Ohio River Valley, I think, because that's where they traveled up and down through the North American continent.
So the next question then is from A. Baker. How does the Ark of the Covenant play into this?
The Ark of the Covenant. I think that the Ark was basically not something that they were like fighting over as much. I think that was basically the covenant symbol given to God's chosen people that held the tablets and it held the staff or the rod of Moses. But we do see another supercharged relic, whether it's legend, lore, fact or fiction, but the Holy Grail. And we see, the occult symbolism with that and how the occult chased after that. Adolf Hitler and the Nazis went off looking for these relics because they believed them to be powerful, supercharged relics. And I think they were after this big time. And that's why you have the Knights of the Round Table, and you have all these legends and lore. King Arthur, the Knights of the Round Table, looking for the Holy Grail, Percival, all that stuff in there about them having these fisher kings, these divine right to rule people guarding, this supernaturally charged relic. And I think that is a pretty pivotal piece to the puzzle. And I love how Graham Hancock in his book, The Sign and the Seal, talked about how the Nabra, forgive me because I'm a Southern man, I can barely speak English, so these big words I have trouble with, but the Nabra Hagast, which was basically the Ethiopian legends, how they line up perfectly parallel, just different names, with the story of Percival. And how the Nabra Hanagast says that Sheba, when she came up to see King Solomon, that they got together and she left and was pregnant and didn't realize it until after she got back. And according to their legends, she gives birth to Menelik the first. And this is a righteous seed line from Solomon. And Percival tells a story about a white European aristocrat comes down to Ethiopia, finds a black woman, falls in love with her. They have a child. I think his name was Frenitz or something like that in the Percival story. But all these things line up perfectly with these Ethiopian legends. And Graham Hancock traces that and thinks that it's like basically a hidden treasure map uh, for the Ark of the Covenant. And he thinks that uh, the Ark of the Covenant, I'm sorry, that the Holy Grail was code for the Ark of the Covenant, and that it wound up in Ethiopia. And that's the last time that they had any kind of traces of it, because this Menelik, supposedly, according to the legends, went to see Solomon when he was an adult and said, "Hey, you're my dad," basically. And he taked him in, but then Menelik steals the ark and smuggles it down into Ethiopia. So if there is any kind of like supernatural relic in this seed war, I think it would be this Holy Grail.
You got some quite esoteric questions coming in, but I'll keep going with them. All right, so Professor Hamamoto, can you comment on current bloodline merging between the Han Chinese, Ku Jin, and the Ashkenazi Jews, Larry Summers?
Yeah, that honestly, guys, I've not got that deep into it. I just finished this book in January and released it, and so I'm just basically got my toes dipped into the deep end of this pool, and this is a deep pool. But what I found so far is very compelling, and I'm starting to dig down through it. But I think we see hints of it with even the mythology. When you go to China, you have, I can't remember what they're called now, but these serpent people all depicted, and these dragons. And then you go into India, these, I can't remember the name, but it starts with an N, but there's the serpent people. You just have all these esoteric stories throughout the world of this serpent lineage and these serpent gods. I think that's echoing all back to this thing that we're talking about.
So does this tie into David Icke's theories then of reptilians and shapeshifters and other royal bloodline is reptilian?
Yeah, I think so, because whether they're like true physical reptilian, I mean, like green scales and stuff, I don't know, or if it's they have this bloodline in them that originates to a serpentine type entity. Because the Nakash, according to which scriptures you read and stuff, but he's compared to a serpentine angel, a dragon angel, and they called him an anointed guardian cherub in the Masoretics. But when you get into the Septuagint and stuff, it talks about he was a seraphim, a fiery one. And that's another thing. You go down into the Egyptians, the Africans, up in your neck of the woods too, the Druids, they all talk about these shining ones.
All right, well, viewers, thank you for the questions that are coming in. We're fast approaching 2,000 watching live across all the platforms. And CJ's wondering, did the giants mate with earthly women?
Yeah. According to some of the writings and stuff, they did. And the ones that had successful births almost died in the birthing process. But they were larger than normal, I believe. But I don't think that they come out just so huge that they couldn't, even deliver them. But I think that's kind of like maybe they just had like really rapid growth and grew to this height, after the fact. But
so was it the size of the babies then that caused some of the mothers to die at birth?
Yeah, that was the word or the legends of it. And it's like saying, I don't know how much time that you got left, but I definitely wanted to kind of show this off and talk about this a little bit, because
we got as much time as you want, Doc. Keep going.
Because I think this ties into it too, and this was another one of my fascinations, man. Giants and these elongated skulls.
Yes, please.
And for those that's not familiar, this is from Paracas. This is a Paracas skull, but this is a juvenile. This is not a full-grown adult male. and you have this
Oh,
elongated skull, in which I got a bunch of signatures on it. I've had all my fringy friends like Timothy Alberino, Tony Merkel, and Giorgio sign it. Anytime I go to a conference, I take it with me and have people sign it. But modern day, anthropologists and archaeologists all want to say that this is from head binding. And I'm not going to argue with them that some were head binding, but I don't think all were. And when you are a child, I think it's they start once they become a year old or 2 years old, they wrap or bind or board their head and force it to grow out elongated like this. So you can imagine the pain, the headaches, the discomfort that you would be putting yourself and your children through to achieve this aesthetic look. And I'm a firm believer in whys. Okay, they did this. Well, why did they do this? Because they were emulating something else that they seen. And I know you're from Europe, but here in the United States, the mullet is a big thing, and it's making a comeback. And it started a few years ago, and one of the main proponents was this guy named Morgan Wallen, this country music artist that showed up rocking the mullet. Then everybody else started imitating him and trying to copy his look because he was an important icon, in American culture. And I think that's what we have here. There was somebody or a group of people that had this elongated head that was an important icon in their culture, and they wanted to emulate and look like them. And when we look through the ones that are known from head binding, none of the features of the skull besides the elongated portion change. They still have their sadrasutra lines. The brain case volume has not increased. The eye orbits are the same. I mean, everything, as far as a normal human skull is exactly the same. It's been elongated because it's been stretched and compressed. Well, some of these that they found, including this one, if you look, there's no sadrasutral line. And for those that's not familiar, you can Google search and look. It's basically a peace sign crack that's on your skull, and it separates these different skull caps. Well, all the ones they find from head binding, they still have their sadrasutra lines. But there's a large handful that they find, like this guy, that has no sadrasutra line. So we know by the large amounts of proven elongated skulls from head binding, that doesn't erase that sadrasutra line. So that's a really distinct factor in some of these. Another thing is if you look at the eye orbits, they're about 25 to 30% larger than a normal skull. When L.A. Marzulli and his group of anthropologists and scientists and archaeologists went down there and studied these things, they did DNA samples on these things, measured every little thing, brought optometrists with them. They were really thorough. But the optometrist examining these eye orbits, he says that they were 25 to 30% larger. He said, so we can assume safely that the pupillaries were 25 to 30% larger also. He said, and the distance between the eyes right here, he said, is a lot more narrow than a normal skull. He said, all the elongated ones we find, it doesn't increase the eye sockets or any of that stuff. It doesn't decrease the width between them. So this is a genetic thing. He said, so I think, he said that these hybrid beings had night vision like a predatory animal, like an owl, because how the eyes are set up. And it kind of goes with the legends around the world. All of these Nephilim or giants, they were famed to be cave dwellers. So it kind of makes sense if they had night vision because they were cave dwellers. They were in the dark constantly. And they drilled a hole in the top of one of these and filled it with rice to measure the brain case volume. Well, in a handful of these, the same things, ones with the large eye sockets and with no Sadra Sutra line, those guys had like a 15% larger brain case volume. And then if you go to underneath, this hole is where the spine connects to the skull. If you Google search, I think they call it the foramen magnum, but if you look, all skulls mount right here in the center for balance. All the ones they find that they say is from headboarding still have this mount right here in the center. But these guys, they're all the way at the back because to help it balance. If that thing was in the center, it would just be looking up at the sky all the time. So by mounting it further back, it better balances this elongated head. So all the ones that they find from head binding, it doesn't change the anchor point of the skull. So once again, it shows you that this was genetic. It was built in the DNA. And there's even been stories from Spanish explorers and things in their journals that they found mummies in caves down in Peru that still had unborn infants in the womb with elongated heads. They got drawings of them and multiple recordings of them. But of course, like the Smithsonian here in the United States, some people got their hands on them and they just mysteriously disappeared. And even the Peruvian legends go right along with these because Viracocha, that was one of their main gods, the creator god. In their legends, it says that Viracocha was pale-skinned, elongated head, long beard. These are all contradictory aesthetics from the Peruvian people. The Peruvian people were shorter. They didn't have elongated heads. They had dark skin, and they can't grow beards that well. So this, screams, alien or foreigner of the land. But it says that Viracocha pulls up on this, on serpents, a bed of serpents without paddles. And that he has a group of people, if you want to call them disciples, and they call them the Viracochan. And that they show up and they civilize Peru. He gives them the 7 sacred sciences, teaches them how to do math, to study the map the stars, architecture, all of these things. And the legends tell all the different towns that they go through. And they have mapped this, and they call it the path of Viracocha. And without fail, every single town that he stopped at, they find megalithic architecture and elongated skulls without fail. And when he leaves, he sails off, him and his Viracochan, and he says that he would return when they most needed him, so to be watching for him, and he would arrive just the way he came the first time. So he leaves, and what happens? The Spanish pull up. What are they on? They're on ships without paddles because they got sails. They get off the boat. They're pale-skinned. They're tall. They got long, thick beards. And they're wearing this metal armor, glistening, glowing in the sun, looking like they're God Viracocha from their legends. So they, threw gold and silver at him and give him everything he wanted and worshiped him like a god because they thought he was Viracocha. And that's how he, took over South America so easily. He went along with it. And then after a certain amount of time, once they started figuring out he was no god, it was too late. He was done so far deep into South America, they couldn't fight him off anymore. But the Spaniards in their journals said that they seen a group of people different. That there was a group of people that had pale skin, beards, and elongated skulls. And that they asked them, who are these people? They're obviously not from here. Who are these people? And they said, these are the descendants of the Viracochan. So I think these were the God Kings, the hybrid race like we've been talking about, and they were the ruling elite class. And their subjects wanted to venerate them and look like them.
Wow, this is fascinating. You've got a few people asking about your thoughts on the pyramids and as to whether you think giants were involved with the pyramids?
I think so. I think that is a pre-flood relic. I think it's a lot older than what they say it is, and that what we call the Egyptians found it and settled there and built around it, or maybe added to it, because we have the same thing in North America. When uh, Lewis and Clark and all these guys started finding these mounds and these megalithic earthworks, they started talking to the natives that lived there and asked them, hey, when did you guys build this? Without fail, all of them. They said, we didn't build this. We found it. And we thought it was important, so we hung around and added to it and upkept it. I think that's the same thing with the pyramids.
All right. So next question is, let's see. Hold on a second. All right. I hope these aren't too esoteric. What about the mound builders along the Natchez Trace?
Natchez Trace. Now, where is that exactly? Is that North America?
Yeah, don't worry about that one. Let me go on to the next one. Can he comment on the Grand Canyon Smithsonian cover-up? And has there been headway made in exploring the canyon in recent years?
Yeah, there's a lot of stories and documents and newspaper articles that the Smithsonian hired this man to go out and explore, and he reported finding these ancient Egyptian-like tombs and caverns, and they found all these artifacts and all this stuff, and it made the newspaper, and then all of a sudden, it's like, no, that's ain't nothing there. Don't look here. And when they try to search it out, it was in the newspaper, this guy's name, that he was commissioned by the Smithsonian. And later, when people tried to dig into this and question them, they said that they had no records of this expedition. So they scrapped it. I mean, are we to believe that this newspaper just lied and made up all these stories and made up this name and put the Smithsonian's name to it, not thinking they'd find out about it and call it a lie? I think it's the same thing as like Roswell. That guy that found the saucer, reported it, and then told him that there was going to be a press conference. And he went out there and they had this fake weather balloon laying out in front of him. And if you look at those pictures, that guy looks shocked because I don't think they told him. I think they're like, okay, come in here for this press conference, and then you just roll with whatever we say. And if you look at them pictures, that guy's looking at that captain and looking at this thing like, what the hell is this? This is not what I found. So it's I think it's another grand cover up. And we have even evidence in Egypt. They found tombs with tobacco and cocaine, corn, all these different things that's not, indigenous to Africa. So it shows they were traveling back and forth, and they even have depictions of, North American corn. Yeah, we were definitely diffusionists. We were not isolationists. We were sailing the globe and exploring all these places and trading with other civilizations long before academia says that we were.
So next question, is there a connection between blue bloods, Anunnaki, and the blue Hindu gods?
Yeah, I think so, 100%. That's what I was talking about earlier, how the Anunnaki sound just like the Genesis 6 narrative, making Nephilim hybrids, and then the blue serpent people in India. I think it's all the same story.
Satan's season is what exactly? Saturn, ?
Yeah, Satan's little season. I've actually talked to a couple guys on my program about that. I had one guy come on and lay out the reasons why he believes we are not in Satan's little season. And then I had two other gentlemen that were little seasonists that came on and laid out their explanations to why they believe that we are. But what that theory is basically is saying that before Jesus passed away and died on the cross, he told his apostles that he would be coming soon, and that some of them would not taste death before they seen him coming in all his glory. And so basically the little seasonists believe that our timeline is all messed up. Like you could add like another 700 to 1,000 years to it, and that's why you have the Greek Dark Ages and all this timeline jumbled up stuff. And they talk about Mount Vesuvius erupting and all these different natural disasters, and they align that to the disasters mentioned in the book of Revelation, and how in 70 AD they destroyed the temple. Uh, the emperor stood in the temple of God, proclaimed to be God and be worshipped. So they take all that and say that they believe the happenings of Revelation had already happened, and that Christ had already ruled for his 1,000 years, and we are now in Satan's little season, and basically our memory has been wiped. We don't remember it because Scripture says that he would be allowed to deceive the nations. So basically wipe the memory of everyone, and all this Gothic architecture that we see that's huge and beautiful and got the antennas in the air, that these are remnants of that millennial reign, and these buildings were tapping into the ether and free energy, and that's how they explain all these megalithic structures, that they believe that all this stuff was constructed during the millennial reign of Christ. But me personally, I love entertaining and hearing new thoughts. I'm open to hear anybody talk about anything. I try to be what they call a good Berean. I like to hear everybody out and then search stuff out and see if it's true. Uh, I'm just not quite there yet as me being a little seasonist, but it's definitely fascinating to research and look at.
Did the Anunnaki have elongated heads?
Some of them, if you go to some of the depictions and some of the hats and stuff, the miters that they wore, a lot of people theorize that these miter hats and these like Egyptian pharaoh hats, how they're so elongated, that they were made to fit this elongated skull ruling class. And we even see, I think it's with Nefertiti and shoot, what's the other guy's name? Akhenaten. If you go to Egypt and look at their depictions, they remove all doubt, because they even have depictions of them without the headdress on and having this huge elongated skull, and even Nefertiti holding up her baby with an elongated skull up to the rays of the sun.
Could it be that Epstein's Zorro Ranch in New Mexico was the site of a Bloodlines breeding program?
Could possibly be. I'm not familiar with that resort, but I mean, it's definitely a possibility.
Well, viewers, we just interviewed Juliet Bryant, Epstein Survivor Part 2. A mother's come on the podcast as well, and she will be talking about the breeding program and cloning and all the eugenic stuff that Epstein was up to. So look out for that one. Next question for Doc. Does he think Mount Akash is connected with gods or aliens?
I think they're the same. I think we get hung up on verbiage. If we take a textbook definition, what is an alien? It's something not of this world. So if we look at the Anunnaki, if we look at God, if we look at Satan, we look at angels, aliens, all these different things, they are all not of this world. I think it's the same. We're talking about the same thing. We just call it different names, and they present themselves in different lights as the generations go to be better received by the people, because it's the same, even the same agenda. If you listen to some of these abductees and you believe them, they were taken, and what happens? Sperm is reported to be taken from the men. Ovum is reported to be taken from the women, and they wind up pregnant, and then miraculously the baby just disappears and is gone. So it's like they come in and take the baby. All of the cattle mutilations, they're taking stuff from cattle that biologically is the closest thing to ours. Our blood is almost completely interchangeable with bovine. So I mean, when it's the same exact thing that happened in Genesis 6. The gods, came down, bred with the daughters of men, and made Nephilim giants, a hybrid race. It's nothing new is under the sun. They're doing the same thing they did back then.
What do you think of Jesus's lost years?
I think they're lost. No, I don't know. I mean, I've heard the theories. People say that he, went out east and got, schooled in the mysticism and all that kind of stuff. But I'm one of these people that I don't think everything is in the Bible, and I'll ruffle some feathers of some Christians, but I try to be an honest, realist person. This was not a science book. It's not a genealogy book. It doesn't have the answers, to every single thing. Do I think it's valuable? Oh, certainly. But we have to remember this is not something that was written in real time. It wasn't like an ESPN play-by-play. It was written looking backwards thousands of years. So you're basically getting the highlights and high notes. So just because they're missing from the scripture doesn't mean that it was missing from the people of that time. It's just missing to us.
Do you think the true puppet masters of America are otherworldly?
Oh yeah, I'm a firm believer in the Tower of Babel. A lot of people just think that's a tall building, but if you go to Deuteronomy 32 verse 8, that's a retelling of that story, and it says that not only were the tongues divided, it says the nations, the peoples were divided amongst the B'nai Ha Elohim, the sons of God. Every time that phrase is used, it's talking about divine heavenly beings. And Psalms 82, talking about these same rebellious sons of God that was given dominion over the nations. It says, how long will you rule unjustly, show partiality to the wicked? You desire to live an eternal life, but you shall die and fall like any prince. So they're not talking about human rulers. I mean, if you're a human ruler, yeah, of course I'm going to die. Duh. No, he's talking to divine heavenly beings, rebellious sons of God. And it says that he divided the nations up amongst them to rule, and they're ruling unjustly. But he said, Jacob, Israel, is my allotted portion. And that's why right after that event, he called Abraham out and said, through your name, all nations shall be blessed. So it goes back to that Game of Thrones, that Deuteronomy 32. The sons of God were portioned out lands and people groups, and they rule from behind the scenes. And they're the puppet masters, I believe.
So who are the 144,000?
Me, the way it describes is like basically that they're, virgin priesthood class type people. So it's like these people are, unblemished by sexual morality and things like that. So I've heard some people theorize that, this is just, Israelite Jewish people. I've heard some people theorize that this is a mixture of all the nations. I would tend to lean toward that because I'm not a Zionist. I don't think when it talks about Israel, that it's talking about a political nation. It's talking about, God's people, and we are all, members of, God's chosen people if we decide to be.
So a former person who sent a question in has sent some clarification. The Natchez Trace is in Mississippi and Tennessee. There's mounds all through it. That's why I asked the question, are the mound builders these same people? Does that give any clarification there?
Yeah. See, I think so. I mean, because just like I was saying with the Michigan copper mines and how that Ohio River Valley runs all the way down, into upper Kentucky and straight down shot. You have Tennessee, Alabama. If you look on a map and you had the mounds and stuff stacked up on the North American continent, that's basically the line they travel. So it's kind of like this. They used rivers back then. That's why all these mounds and stuff are close to these rivers, because they were, I believe, coming from Lake Michigan down through the Ohio River Valley. And then once they got to Tennessee, they connected to the Tennessee River. and then went down into, Mississippi and all that type stuff.
You're getting asked about knowledge of the Akashic records and reincarnation.
Yep. My knowledge on the Akashic records is very surface level. I'd say the people in the chat probably know more than I do, if I'm being honest on it. I have a 30,000 foot view of that. And what was the second part? I'm sorry.
Reincarnation.
Reincarnation. A lot of Christians don't believe in that, and the Bible doesn't come right out and say that. But I got educated by a guest on my show not that long ago talking about Elijah. And there's some hints in there that there might be some reincarnation. I mean, that I ain't saying that it's a hill I'm willing to die on, but there's hints to that, because it says that Elijah, he was taken up in a whirlwind, and then later John the Baptist is referred to as the second coming of Elijah, that he had the spirit of Elijah. And I looked over that, not noticed that, my whole adult life. But this guy Ben that I had on the show from End of the World News, he came on and did a show with me about Elijah, and he brought that to my attention. And yeah, the hints are there, whether it's true or we're reading too deep into it, but it's definitely interesting.
Do you have any thoughts on the timing of the second coming of Christ?
No, I mean, I'm not a date setter, but of course I know every single generation since, his death has said, the end is nigh, the end is nigh. But I think we can honestly say that we are closer now than we ever have been. I think that all the groundwork has been laid. We are now looking into this, surveillance state. They're going to know, cameras on every corner, your smartphones, your smart TVs, your smart cars. You're being recorded and tracked everywhere you go now. The book of Revelation talks about, those who do not bow to the beast, they will be killed. Well, how are they going to know that? Because of Palantir in this surveillance state. They're going to know everything you're doing. Now they're wanting to get rid of, first they got rid of the gold and went to the Federal Reserve, here in America, because they're slowly stepping their way toward this beast system, I believe. And it's like a frog in the boiling water. You don't put the frog in there and turn it up to 10. You slowly start cranking it up and getting them closer. That way they don't jump out and they'll just sit right there and boil to death. So they moved away from the gold, went to the Federal Reserve. Now they're starting to transition to this Bitcoin and this digital currency. You got so many countries talking about going to a blockchain system. Once again, they're going to know every dollar you spend. And what does it say? Those who don't take the mark will not be able to buy, sell, or trade. So
they just announced here, Keir Starmer, that they're going to force a digital ID on us.
yes,
More like a digital control grid, more like.
yeah. So I mean, the groundwork has been laid, and we are definitely closer than we've ever been.
Question from RF: do you believe we are inside a firmament, as the Bible says?
I am a believer, because I know there's some people that are what they call the flat earth community and the glober community. I do not dispute that the Bible describes a flat stationary plane with a dome on it. I do not dispute that whatsoever. But I think that God meets people where they're at, and he talked to them in language that they could understand, and something that they already had a grasp on. They already thought it was flat and stationary. They already thought there was a firmament, a dome over the top. So God was just meeting them basically where they were, talking to them in a language that they could understand. And I compare it to when I have this conversation with people, because I mean, it gets heated. There's some people that are flat earthers, man, that get pretty heated over it. And to even go as far as saying you're not a Christian if you don't believe in flat earth, because the Bible talks about a flat earth. But I tell people, when you were a child, you wanted to know where babies come from, right? So you asked your parents, hey, where do babies come from? And you got one of 2 or 3 different variant stories. You either were told, oh, when a man loves a woman, they kiss, and then a bump magically appears in her belly and a baby's born. Or we prayed and asked for one, and a stork dropped it off at our door. You know, did your parents lie to you, or did they just tell you a story that you could wrap your little mind around until you were old enough or smart enough to understand the real story? And I think that's kind of what God did there, because the shape of the plane or realm that we are on wasn't important. What was important was the story of the fall, the rebellion, and the redemption, and coming back into the family of God. That was what was important, not the shape of the earth. But I do believe in the canopy theory, that before the flood, there was a water canopy, vapor over the top of us, and it burst.
Your opinion on the Gnostics?
Gnostics, yeah, the Nag Hammadi texts, and I think that's, I'm not a coincidence theorist. I thought that was very significant that, during this time frame, shortly after, Israel was even made a nation, in Egypt, they found this stash of scrolls, and they called them the Nag Hammadi texts, and it was the Gnostic Gospels. And this come out, and then just like a month or two later, they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, and they're like in direct, conflict with one another. And I tell people, I think it's kind of like God's perfect timing and sense of humor. It's like they put out this Gnostic deception and tried to, lead some people astray, but then the counter move was like, oh, no, no, now look over here at these Dead Sea Scrolls, and we could show you all these texts were preserved and not manipulated through time, and this is the truth. But they are definitely interesting, but I've looked into it, and especially the early church fathers, that's who they were talking about, the wolves in sheep's clothing, inside of their synagogues, because these people were posing as Christians, but they were drinking these kookions, these psychedelic spiked drinks, and having these vision quests and stuff. And they were going and telling the people at church, basically, I'm just adding some creative liberties here, but basically, you're talking about seeing God and visions and miracles and all this stuff. You guys talk about it, but man, over here, 3 houses down at my buddy Ryan's house, we're actually doing it. Come on over here, we'll show you God. And was kind of leading people astray. But the early church fathers, their number one contention with them was everything was metaphysical, nothing was physical, and they denied Christ. They said that he wasn't God in the flesh. He was just a normal man that achieved enlightenment, and was showing everyone else that you can also achieve enlightenment and be like him and get this Christ consciousness. But this was during the time that the Romans were persecuting the Christians, and it was the perfect cop out to save your life. Oh no, I'm Gnostic. Jesus wasn't real. No, I don't believe in that. And so a lot of the early church fathers was talking about it upset a lot of the Christians. Not only was they teaching false doctrine in their eyes, but they were also denying the physicality of Jesus. So therefore, they wasn't persecuted and burned at the stake and threw into the lion's den and all this stuff. They called them cop-outs.
All right. Well, thank you for the super chat question. Who are the alleged 13 bloodlines, and what verifiable historical evidence, if any, traces their influence across major empires and institutions?
Well, like I said, this is something that I've just kind of first got into, so I've not like went deep yet, but I'm in the process. But if you guys are interested in this type of stuff, that Nicholas DeVere, The Dragon Legacy, is a great book, and he names some of them in there. Of course, I don't think they're going to show all their cards, but he talked about the DeVeres were one, the Merovingians were one, and even talked about the myths and legends of the Europeans, how they talked about the Druids and the elves, that this was the elven race, and it kind of drew back to this other family, and that all these stories where you have these mythological characters, it's basically esoteric, symbolism and hidden in plain sight, kind of talking about these bloodlines.
All right, next question is a long one. Tom Horn, a prophecy author, refers to a primeval kiva built for eschatological purposes beneath the earth, hinting at a large underground structure tied to end times beliefs. Any Bible reference? Question mark.
Yeah, Tom Horn. I've read quite a bit of his stuff. I've read Unearthing the Cloud Eaters, and it was about giants. Popus Romanus, talking about the last pope. He kind of predicted who the last pope was going to be. That was pretty wild. Uh, and one of his books, it's kind of relevant for this time, was Wormwood and the Messenger. That he basically had a dream that he's seen this swirling dragon on fire coming through space and towards Earth, and that a calendar basically started flipping like crazy, and it stopped, and a finger pointed, he said, to trying to think, it was September something. No, wait, yeah, it was Friday the 13th in September, or April, sorry, April, Friday the 13th, I think, of 2026 or 28, something like that. I'm sorry, guys, my brain is kind of rumbling together. But anyway, he said that he had this vision, and that he said the Lord told him that this was wormwood. And he thinks that this date that was given to him was possibly wormwood striking. And according to the Bible, this happened right during the middle of the tribulation period. So it was kind of like a date set for the midpoint of the Great Tribulation. But I know he definitely talked about like the underground bunkers, the dumbs, and all that kind of stuff. And that ties into the book of Revelation, where it talks about in the end times that the kings and the leaders of the great nations will hide themselves in the mountains. You know, think about that. We're talking about ancient people thousands of years ago talking about world leaders hiding themselves in mountains. I mean, I mean, surely they ate some bad pizza and just seen some crazy stuff. But to me, I think that's kind of profound. And you see it all over the news. They've been doing this stuff forever. Up there in Alaska, they have that huge seed vault bank. You have the Mormons out in Utah have that huge DNA bank. They have this inside of a mountain, this huge vault full of DNA. And you have these movies like Armageddon, them, you know, this asteroid coming towards Earth, and they blow it up to try to save humanity. Uh, what was that other one? It was, I think it was 2025, where the world ends and this guy's running trying to save his kids. But there's this ark, there's these huge arks being built in China that they've been working on for the past, 30, 40 years. I think they drop hints to all this stuff. They see it coming. They know the writing's on the wall, and they're prepping for it. That's what I believe.
What do you think of Paul Stobbs' Nephilim looked like clowns theory?
Yeah, Paul. I've had Paul on the show. He's a really smart dude, and it was definitely an out of the box thing. And if I'm just being honest, and Paul, you know I love you, brother. If you see this, I mean, but when I first heard that, I was like, I kind of looked at it like Dr. Joy Pugh talking to me about the serpent seed. I was like, oh man, this is ridiculous. I mean, the stuff people will do for clicks and attention. But once I actually heard him out, I was like, okay, this makes sense. As we are, when we hear clowns, we think about the modern clown with all the crazy, paint and how we view a clown. But he's saying that basically the modern clown is their spin and dramatized version of maybe what the Nephilim looked like. And what the Nephilim looked like, according to a lot of the legends and lore, because he kind of did like I did. He went through comparative mythology and went through all these different continents and stories and people groups and kind of compared them. And he found this common denominator that a lot of them were depicted with really pale skin, bloody, red colored noses. A lot of times they were giants, and all these tribes would dress up like these, hybrid god kings or whatever the situation was for their story. but that was the common denominator, is that they all kind of looked like that, and they were imitating them.
Do you think that these elite bloodlines are about to weaponize AI to either contain or eliminate us cattle bloodlines?
Oh yeah, I mean, 'cause even the Masons even talk about it, like in Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma. He talks like that. He's like, basically, the profane are cattle, and we're to be bred, worked, and when we serve no more purpose, be offed. And I think that's exactly what's going on, because uh, I don't want to get you in trouble on your channel, but back in the day when we had the pokey poke, if you know what I'm saying, uh, if you go back and listen to Gates and all these different guys that are involved with the WHO and NATO and these world organizations, they were openly talking about this, a decade ago or so, but then now recently they've gotten quiet about it. But what was their number one concern? If you go back and listen to their TED Talks and all this other stuff, it was population control. Number one concern. And it kind of goes back to the lifeboat theory. There was this professor that talked about lifeboat theory, and he had this theory that if you got a group of people and put them on a boat and give them a handful of, rations for food and supplies or whatever, and set them out, that it's a matter of time before a hierarchy is set up. He said because they perceive a limited amount of resources, and there has to be a competition for those limited resources. So immediately a hierarchy is set up. The strong take over and bully the weak and take what they need. And if they don't get in line, they're thrown off the boat. And that's what I think we see here, because they talk about how, we're lacking fresh water. We don't have enough fresh water to sustain humanity and the population for X amount of years, and the food and the land and all these, dwindling resources. We're competing for, all these resources. We need population control. And you had the Georgia Guidestones come out and basically just said it outright. And then what happens? We have the whole 2020 thing, basically like the Eskimos. Uh, Once the old people get too old, what do? They off them because they can't contribute to the hunt or the society no more. That's who that
Logan's
targeted.
Run. Logan's Run. Remember that program?
Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
what they do, man. And so they come after the elderly, and the people with underlying health conditions, the people that are drags on the economy and the society in their eyes. That wiped out a big swath of them. And then they come up with the solution. And what happens? We've seen with the solution, we had 20-year-old soccer players and basketball players, football players, these prime athletes falling over dead on the field from blood clots and blown arteries and heart conditions. Well, where did that come from, folks? And
We better
then,
stop. We better stop there on this subject. Let's
yeah,
just hold on. So you got asked about Free Eye Atlas, the comment. Have you got any thoughts on that?
I thought that was pretty wild. That was another thing too. That was just like, man, what do you believe? But I read something on social media. I'm not sure if that's correct, but they had said that they have now confirmed that it is a comet. That they've looked at it, and they can confirm that it is a comet now. So they no longer believe it's a huge mother spaceship coming to destroy us all.
Yeah, but it's supposed to be affecting our energies. It's getting here. The closest to Earth is I think it's December 19th. And yeah, my partner's into everyday studying and watching videos on the Atlas. All right, well, my friend Doc, this has been so fascinating. We've kept you on for 2 hours almost. Huge thank you for being so generous with your time.
No, I
I've
appreciate
got
you, man.
I've got all of Doc's links in the description box if you're watching on replay. I'm going to put them in the live chat now. Is there anything you would like to say in conclusion to the viewers then?
I guess just take what I say with a grain of salt. I'm a nobody, but I like to study, and I have my opinions on things like anybody else. But yeah, man, just hear people out, do your own research, and see what you come up with. And we got to share our ideas and our research and studies with other people, like conversations we're having today with Sean. I call it the exchanging of puzzle pieces. I think we all have pieces to the puzzle, and the more conversations we have, the more puzzle pieces that we're going to gather and have a better 30,000-foot view of this crazy messed up thing that we call life. So, but yeah, my show, if you guys like these conversations, I talk about this stuff on my show every week. It's the Prometheus Lens podcast. I coined it the hero's journey. You got to go into the unknown. You have to slay the dragon, rescue the damsel, and hoard up that treasure. But then your journey's not over. Like all great epics and heroes, you must turn around and share that wealth of knowledge with the world and save humanity. So come join us on the hero's journey.
Links are in the description. And if you've got any guests that you think would come over here as well to talk about these things, we would love to hear from them. So I'm going to close the show and let you go, my friend. Thank you for spending this time with us again. Cheers, Doc.
Well, thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Cheers. All right, viewers. Yep. So like I said, absolutely fascinating. First time to get Doc on the channel. Put a 1 in the chat if you'd like us to get more guests speaking of these subjects. And we will arrange that. And I'll let you guys know what we've got coming up this week. So my next show that's booked in so far, we've got James Corbett, Unmasking Epstein. That is on the 25th. And then we've got the Manhattan Madam, Exposing Epstein and Elites, Kristen Davis, also on the 25th. Going to be a busy day on the 25th. And then on the 25th as well, we have got Inside Charlie Kirk's Death, a conversation with Myron Gaines. Oh, yeah, I've been trying to speak to Myron for a while. That's going to be fascinating. But I'm sure we'll have more shows between now and then, and I'm going to organize some more call-in shows as well. So thank you for staying with us for 2 hours on Saturday night. Yeah, I did see it. I've been watching Candace every night. Doing these massive live streams. She's had some sort of threats to life today. If you go on X and read her Twitter post, she's basically saying that the French government have got a hit on her, and it's related to Israel and all this other stuff. She gives a very detailed account on her X. So yeah, go over and support Candace. She's got some balls, saying the things she's saying, whether you believe her or not. To just go out there after a mate got whacked and just be pushing all the same buttons, but then some. She's definitely got some balls saying what she's saying. So yeah, let's hope she doesn't get whacked. But thank you for your support, guys. Thank you for all your questions, and please don't forget to click on Doc's links and support